Awesome. What's happening, team? It is so good to have so many of you signed in and on live, which is awesome. Doing this live is just going to be so much more engaging. We're going to be asking a lot of questions of you. So make sure fingertips are at the ready, because this has to feel like a little bit of a collaboration, a bit of a discussion. It can't be a monologue for myself and Mass, and it's not Netflix. Okay. So none of you are allowed to sit there, pull out popcorn and just chill. All right. We're going to challenge you mentally and physically, because you're going to have to get really engaged so that we can just really connect with you guys. Connection is one of our values, our core values here at the PFCA. Our aim is that we are trying to connect incredible coaches who share similar values as ours, so that you guys don't feel alone, whether you're in freaking Solihull or somewhere beautiful in Argentina. There is a group of incredible coaches literally signed in today who are trying to do amazing things, trying to raise the standard. It says it on Craig's jersey. We are here to elevate the status of the personal trainer, right? The status, the respect, and the long-term career, all of which we believe we have a real opportunity through the PFCA, through education, through webinars, through seminars, all of it, to really bring everything together. So that's even why we do these webinars, is to kind of connect incredible people around the world, and we can do some good education. But without me just blabbering on, I want to introduce you to today's seminar. I'm going to share my screen and we can get started. Okay. So hopefully you didn't see any of that. Okay, Mass, is that full screen?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Okay, all right. So like I said, everyone, before we get actually started, for those of you who are tuning live, you have to engage with us. We're going to ask you questions. There's going to be time limits of which you guys need to respond. So please make sure fingers at the ready. For those of you who are watching the recording back, try and do it as if you were doing it live, right? So we can make you actively think about this rather than just sit there passive and we just feed you this information. Right. So without further ado, welcome to the Energy Systems webinar. My name is Coach Jans. You've got Coach Mass leading the way, and let's get started. Over to you, Mass.
Thanks, mate. So we'll start easy. We'll start quick. So simple Y or N in the chat box, please, just so we know who's here, who we're aiming this at. How many of you are qualified PTs? Yes or no?
Okay, so Mass, we've got a really good, interesting cohort here, but I'll be saying 98% are qualified PTs.
Sweet.
Sweet.
Next question. How many of you have done FFC?
Guys, we've got a lot of no's, a few yeses, a few not yet, a few doing it currently.
Yep.
Good. Keep it coming, guys. Keep coming. Doing it. Nice, Connor. Just started. Good work, Ryan. Nice. Wanting to pass PT course. Good. Nice. Great course. Would recommend. Thank you, my boy. Okay. This is a weird question. How many of you haven't heard much about the FFC? Just raise your hand like a yes. How many of you haven't heard much? Just a yes. Okay, cool. So we got a little bit of work to do. Nice. Okay, cool. Brilliant. Okay. All right. Well,
okay, so
over to you, Mass.
Yeah, sweet. So I think that's good for us to know, because a lot of what sits within today's chat is taken from FFC and probably leaning over then to what is going to be discussed in FFC 2. So for those of you who don't know about FFC or haven't done it yet, this is a great insight for you into what sits inside it. So to set the scene for today and our aims, really, so just level set some intentions. What we want to do is focus on the program design element of energy systems. So we're going to make some assumptions, which I'll go through shortly. But just to set the scene for you guys, just to get your thinking caps on as far as coaching is concerned. As we see it today, there's a distinct difference in the industry between what is progressive fitness and what is sort of entertainment and nonsensical, mindless stuff. The challenge that we faced as coaches, I would say, and Jens would say the same, is that the unfortunate reality is that the clients learn from what is put out there the most, and what is put out there the most is probably the entertainment-driven stuff. And so we meet clients at the point where they have intentions and expectations around fitness being entertainment. And so then our struggle as coaches, being people that want to help and generally probably being slightly people-pleasing in our natures, is that we can actually sway our prescriptions and what we offer our clients further towards entertainment because it's what they want, more so than what they need. So just with that in mind, with progress versus entertainment, we're thinking that generally as coaches, we'll probably have a struggle in balancing between those two things. So I just want you to think about that, how that plays out in your coaching practice. And then Genzo, if you can just flick across to the next workout, please. Just to come, that's the one. So I'm just going to table this as a workout. So 20-minute AMRAP, as many reps or rounds as possible. 500-meter row, 20 burpees, 15 box jump step downs, 10 muscle ups, 5 snatches at 100 kilos or 70 kilos for a female. Now, have a think, look at that workout critically, and think, who would that be good for? Who would that be good for? That's the question. Okay. So this is the kind of the reason I'm tabling this. This is the kind of workout that you might see. All right, I've gone to the top end as far as like weights and skill levels concerned. What I'm trying to say though is that this is something that we would see sort of banded about in sessions, but this would be for a select group of people. So the question that Joe Robertson has just answered there, for the experienced CrossFit athlete, dead right, high level, competent CrossFit, advanced CrossFit, brilliant. Okay, we get the gist, all right? Now then, do we, and answer yes or no, do we see this or a version of this trying to be delivered or prescribed in perhaps a scaled manner to people who shouldn't be doing this? Do we see that? Sweet. Now I know I've probably led the answer there, of course, but I think we're all on the same page with that. We do see this kind of thing banded about. From an energy systems point of view, if we're to look at that with a critical eye, can we even begin to establish what that might be, that session might be for anybody other than an elite CrossFit athlete? It's real difficult, right? Because for the elite CrossFit athlete, we'd look at that. That would be, for them, that would be an aerobic piece. So they've got sufficient skills and sufficient motor control to maintain every one of those movements across the piece for 20 minutes and maintain an aerobic pace throughout, okay? What would happen to everybody else is that their movement and quality and skills would break down just from the sheer volume and the weights involved, okay? So it's going to be incredibly difficult for the Gen Pop client to manage this accordingly, from which to get the desired energy system outcome. Okay, is that clear? So, just a question to you folks, and I'm just going to give you 30 seconds or a minute to answer this. So what I want you to do is just type out your stab at an answer, but don't press.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you there. I think you were just about to say.
Yeah.
So, guys, just in terms of like a little bit of a system from a culture perspective, when we do ask a question, We want to delay your ability to answer that question so that we don't give each other the answers. So we are challenging you to think about the answer yourself so that you aren't fed the answer by someone being quicker at the fingertips than you. So here's the deal. Any question we're going to ask, I will control the timer. We'll have 60 seconds to type in the timer. And after which, then I'll say, okay, and now press send. All right, so please, no one jump that too soon.
Cool. So the question then to this workout, just as a little play and get you thinking, how would you so from this workout, your clients just completed this workout, you've given them this workout. Where would you go from here? So where would this workout progress to? How would you progress this workout for your GemPop client? So have a think, get your answers down, and then fire away when Genzo tells you to.
Right, timer is on, guys. Let's get it. Please make sure you give as much context as possible so we can really challenge you guys. Megan, that's your first strike. Don't do that again. Kian, that's a strike for you too. Come on, guys. Don't press enter when you're typing this.
So just to answer the question around the clarity, I'll just say it again. Sorry if I'm unclear here. Imagine that you've just prescribed this workout, if you will, to your client, and say that you thought that this was a good workout. And I know that for your GemPop client, I know that we've just established that this is only a good workout for a select few people in the world. But say you've prescribed it, play the game. So just play with me. How would you progress this? Okay, the answer's in there. It's going to be a struggle, but just have a stab at sort of having a think as to how you might progress this piece, if you can.
All right, guys, can we all press send? That's 90 seconds. Let's press send. Let's see where we're at. If some of you got a little bit confused with the line of questioning, that's okay. But what we want to see is how you guys are perceiving this. So through what lens, right? Are you seeing it through the lens of time, right? If we look at like AMRAP 20, just purely the time thing, are we looking at it through that lens? Are we looking at it through the lens of the intention behind the word AMRAP? Are we looking at it purely from a numbers like 500 goes to 501? Some of you jump to like 600, for example. 20 burpees goes to 21. For like, do you know what I mean? Like, are we that analog in terms of those things? So by sheer asking the question, we are trying to determine what lens you see the world when it comes to progression. Mas, what are you picking up?
I'm just starting from the top. So we've got in the increased amount of time for the AMRAP. So that would be a legit call. So almost sort of maintain the same AMRAP and stretch out the time. Can you remain aerobic for a longer period of time? That's a legit way to look at it. We've got to scale it back, make the movements more achievable. Increase speed on faster exercise, increase intensity on weighted exercise, improve form on technical exercises. Try more rounds in same time. Okay, so increase intensity. Reduce time, reduce number of reps, reduce weight and meters. So again, that would be an increase in intensity. So that we'd be looking to increase the pace there. AMRAP 10, rest 3 minutes between efforts. Nice. So we're basically taking the same workout, splitting it in two, and probably encouraging the client to increase pace there. Duration of increased time, tempo increase from 20 minutes to nice. GemPop potentially make it a partner workout. Interesting. Longer AMRAP. Okay. Thank you, folks. And a few of you have gone in there with some intricacies around making the movements different and what have you. Okay, cool. The reason I just tabled that question was because I want you to start thinking critically about these pieces more than anything. So we all know that essentially everything is always wrong. So for somebody or from somebody at any point in time, it can be considered that a piece is wrong. This workout is neither good or bad. It depends on the intention and who it's for. If, as we all quite rightly said before, if the intention of this piece was an aerobic piece for an elite athlete, this would be a legit workout. Absolutely fine. Clients of mine, clients that we work with at March On would be fine with this workout, and they would complete it in exactly the way that we would want, which would be for it to be aerobic. For everybody else, though, if we think critically about it, so we look at a workout and we think, okay, what's the high level intent? So AMRAP 20. So we're talking about some sort of metabolic effect. So we're probably talking for AMRAP 20, we're talking for an aerobic piece. It's beyond the anaerobic realm, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail. When we start to think about the individualization of this piece, then we'll look at the intricate details. So what have we got in there? We've got a cyclical piece with the row. We've got a dynamic push piece, albeit metabolic, with the burpees. We've got a dynamic hip piece with the box jump steps down. We've got a dynamic pull piece with the muscle up. And again, we've got a dynamic weighted hip piece with the 5 snatches. So just by thinking about it critically and looking at this piece, we can start to establish what that workout is and what the intention is from it. And so then, not that we would do this, but if we wanted to take that piece and prescribe it better for your Gem Pop client, it might be that they've built sufficient capacity on the rower to have a 500-meter row in this setting, which is absolutely fine. Maybe 20 burpees is a bit of a stretch, and for that to be aerobic for that client, it might be a reduction in burpees, or we might remove the burpees and make that more of an absolute strength piece. So it might be push-ups, a number of push-ups that sit in there. The box jump steps down again. If they've created capacity for those to be aerobic in this setting, so how many sets we're sort of looking for in the 20 minutes, and then work that out. Can we maintain that total functional volume of box step ups, jump step down? And that's absolutely fine. Muscle ups, what we're looking for there, vertical pull. So could that be dipping pull-ups if they have them? Could that be a ring row if they're at that point, etc., etc.? Could it be a hang for somebody who's at the very beginner end? And then the dynamic hip bend, could that be a Russian kettlebell swing? Could it be, even for the beginner, could it be a kettlebell deadlift, something along those lines? So we can start to take this thing apart rather than just looking at it for what it is and saying that this is the workout. It's like, no. What sits behind this workout is a set of intentions and desired outcomes for the client. And that's how I just want us to start thinking about how we're programming our conditioning pieces. So that being said, thanks for that little brain stretch and taking part in that. Genzo, can you flick us on?
Sure can. Let's see, there's something there. Yeah, cool. Nice. Not how to scale. Fine. I'm gonna move it.
Okay. So, as I said before, just some quick assumptions. We've only got around about an hour to chat through this, so we didn't want to get stuck into the biology side of this. So we're assuming that there's a prior knowledge from you all around how the body operates and how we produce energy. O2 in, through the lungs, into blood, into muscles, and back out, etc. And all of the intricacies that lie within that, which is all good stuff. All stuff that we'll be digging into in depth in FFC2. But just for today, we're just going to stick with the program design side of things. So then, this energy system overview. A big question that we should ask when we're thinking about our Gem Pop clients, so the clients that we serve most, does energy system or the phrase energy system training have purpose for Gem Pop health and fitness? Big question. Does energy system training have purpose in Gem Pop health and fitness? Or is knowledge of energy systems something that we should have and acquire as coaches, but keep in our back pocket and perhaps learn how to share with the client in language and in a format that links closer to them. So do they need to know about this stuff? It's a big question. Having said that, I'll leave that one with you. Is our view of energy system training clouded by sport? Again, big question. We just want to think, just let that marinate. We're going to come back to that in a bit more detail. We know that aerobic exercise exists, and we know that anaerobic exercise exists. We know that. But what are the two for? And that's what we want to get into today. Okay. We know that all energy systems overlap. So when we're talking about a specific energy system, really it's for our ease of understanding and intent from what we want to get from a particular piece. So here we're looking at creatine phosphate on the most powerful side of the anaerobic spectrum, that 0 to 10 seconds burst. Then we move into glycolysis, into that lactic phase, as the anaerobic system sort of draws out. And then on the other side of the things, for everything outwards from 2.5 to 3 minutes onwards, then we're into the aerobic sphere. Okay. And again, we're talking about the predominant energy system here. So we know that they all overlap, and we know that in reality, different movements and different expressions and different contractions will elicit responses from each energy system through a particular piece. But we're talking about the overriding system, and that's how we're going to talk about this thing today. Okay. So we call this from our PFCA chat, the CP system, which is generally made up of like strength contractions, we call that form. Okay, so forming, we are forming strength, we're forming patterns with movement. So we're talking about generally anaerobic alactic, so creatine phosphate, so without oxygen and without lactate. Here we're looking to shift muscle fibers from mostly aerobic to mostly anaerobic. So we're looking for powerful contractions. More power equals, over time, increased physical potential. Okay, so we're looking to progress upwards with strength through this energy system. We're not going to go into it too much today because we're going to be focusing on the more conditioning pieces, but that's where we would get into the strength continuum and such, and skill progression, etc., etc. Then we come into the lactic, which we call force. Okay, so force here, anaerobic, we're talking about power first here. So again, without oxygen, but then lactate is with lactate. So we're stretching out now. We've got the ability. We've got an injection that allows us to stretch out the sharp stuff. Okay. So we would use this to create a metabolic response, but we know that this has an end point. So we know that this isn't sustainable. So no matter how much we train this thing, it's always going to have an end point, and there's always going to come the point where we either stop and break down, or we rest a certain amount of time and then carry on aerobically. Okay, so it's finite. It also has limited utility, but we'll go into the pros and cons of all these energy systems shortly. Into the aerobic, which is our flow system, which is the system we use predominantly for our coaching practices of GEMPOP. Really, we're looking here at the major use of oxygen as the energy source, and here we think that the assessment provides the main insight into why aerobic training might be prescribed for an individual. Okay, so we talk about GEMPOP. If in that assessment phase, our client lies anything down around general health, around anything around longevity, around feeling great, around their performance at work, around just generally increasing health or whatever it might be, this is where we would point our energy system training. It would be here at flow, sorry. Okay. In general terms, this is an evolutionary, efficient way for us to produce energy. It's actually the most complex way, but it's the most efficient way. Okay. So there are many benefits here, and we'll go through them in a bit more detail shortly. But you can see there in the arrowed section, we go from primitive to modern from an evolutionary point of view. As far as when we go across those energy systems, we go from a high stress to a low stress, from that anaerobic to aerobic. The complexity is very simple and sharp for the anaerobic, but more complex for the aerobic. And as such, then the recovery time is longer for the anaerobic and shorter for the aerobic. Now, some of you might know all this already. Some of you might be thinking, what's this got to do with anything? What this should form really is a solid insight. And this should be like a layer of principle that flashes before your eyes every time you program some sort of metabolic conditioning piece. Okay, so we must be clear then on what impact that's going to have on the client. So how stressful it's going to be, what sort of recovery is going to be required, et cetera, in order to align what you program with the client. So that's a little overview on the energy systems. Can you flick us on, please, Genzo? Any questions on that up to now? Or any thoughts?
Yeah, so for those of you where some of the concepts that Mas is alluding to, if there's any sense of like overwhelm or uncertainty around the science, that's okay for now. Like, we definitely want to go into a little bit of the detail within our education, both at FFC level and FFC2 level. We obviously go deeper into the complexity that is relevant to the people that you work with at different levels. But from a concept, what we really need you guys to get out of this is thinking more critically as to why you're doing this. So if we go back to this slide here, there's a very, very, very fine line between what is progression for my client or what is just purely entertainment, and getting caught up in variety for variety's sake, anti-variety and being completely linear, which is, it's all wrong, right? So there's a few concepts that Mas is alluding to here that, depending on where you are in this rabbit hole, depends on what you can see. So how we talk about a rabbit hole is it gets darker and darker, but the more you learn, the more able you are to see in the dark. Okay, and that changes depending on where you are in your journey. So as we work through this today, the challenge to you is take this on and let it speak to you. But no matter what happens, let's leave with better intentions on the back of this call, with better insights in education. All right. Mas, back over to you, boss. In terms of questions, Mark Ward said, in your opinion, Mas, how would you define metabolic conditioning for a Gen Pop audience? Let's pause that to the end. But that's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think I'll answer it shortly, Matt. So just hold on to that, and I'll probably work through an answer for you there as we go through this thing. Okay, so that first principle around the energy systems is very important. I think another one that we would find very useful as coaches to hold as well in our arsenal, as far as principles are concerned, is thinking about the evolution of the human being. So where we've come from, how we got here, and what are we doing now? Like, how does physical expression now compare to what it was not so long ago, when essentially we haven't changed that much? Okay, so over time, really, we've gone from our physical culture being one of function and survival to a physical culture that is now found in leisure pursuits only. Okay, so it used to be a necessity, it used to be part of everyday life, and now it's definitely a choice, to the point where for our survival today, we don't need to do anything at all. So just let that sit with you for a sec. We don't need to do anything at all. Technology is so advanced, medicine's so advanced, and it's only going to continue to advance, that people survive doing very, very little. Now, do they live a good life? In our minds, perhaps not. But from a survival point of view, physical expression is no longer required. So that's just one to keep in mind. So from a human point of view, the amount of physical and cognitive challenge that we need to do in order to live today and move forward, regardless of reproduction, regardless of survival, very limited. Okay, it's very limited. So there's been a big shift. There's been a big shift in time, over time. But us as humans and how we operate has stayed exactly the same. Okay, so that's just a big thing to bear in mind. I know it was a long time ago when the hunter-gatherers used to go, and this is where the 10,000 steps sort of shout came from. It was a rough estimate on how far they used to walk or jog or run each day in order to go and get food and bring it back and then rest. Okay, we try and replicate that today with this 10,000 steps scenario, but just think that was definite necessity. Today, if you're doing 10,000 steps, really you have to make that some sort of a ritual, some sort of a choice where you're like, this means something to me, so I'm going to go out and do it. We don't have to walk to work. We don't have to walk anywhere. So it's a choice that you make to get out and do that thing. Okay. During the shift in between these two things, what's happened is the leisure pursuit has been linked to sport. Okay. Now, it's not surprising because we enjoy sport, we enjoy the challenge, we enjoy the competition. Okay, so gone are the competition to find food, etc. So we create this competition in sporting endeavors, which is cool, and we all enjoy that. But what's happened as this leisure pursuit of physicality has been attached to sport. So then, through the 70s and 80s, what did we do with sport and all that it entailed? Well, what we did with everything else, because we're curious by nature, we studied the shit out of it. So then a whole bunch of academia was formed. So thousands and thousands of studies around maxes of strength, maxes of VO2, and now thousands of studies around sort of high intensity fitness and all that good stuff. But studies around health and longevity are much less. Generally because the challenge in doing that, the time frames required, the cost required, etc., etc. So what we end up with is a shed load of information around powerful expression and sport that filters down into what we understand and what the broader collective understands as fitness. And so that's where we end up today in energy system training, where a lot of what's played out there is in fact a derivative of a sporting practice that's gone before. So yes, it's research-based and yes, it's got evidence behind it and what have you. But when you look into the context of where that stuff came from, it's perhaps not as applicable as we might think for our Gen Pop athletes who are Gen Pop clients, should I say, who have come in to train with you at lunchtime and want to go back to work and concentrate for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, perhaps we've given them one of these sporting activities, sporting prescriptions on their lunchtime. And what's the upshot of that in the afternoon? They're goosed. They're good for nothing in the afternoon. So then, when we look to the utility of our prescription based on where we are now and what we know, thinking critically about where the information that we have today in order to formulate our ideas and therefore our prescriptions to our clients, we have to stop and think, is this a sporting prescription that I'm just about to give John, who's 48 and is going to go back to the accounting office and have to concentrate for the rest of the afternoon? Is this useful for him? Is this progressive? Where does John go from here? Is this the right dose of challenge? We don't want to make it too easy, of course, because we're looking to create physical challenge that creates adaptation, that creates growth and progress. But it perhaps doesn't have to be the AMRAP 20 with the snatches and muscle ups. So you see the difference. That sport, what John needs is perhaps something different. So a big insight around where we've come from, where we've come through, and where we are now is a strong piece to hold when we're designing prescriptions in program design for these metabolic conditioning pieces. Any thoughts, Genzo?
Yeah, so very well put there, Mass. Just to kind of bring it back to a little bit of relatability for the room. So to some of you, you might be thinking, okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. I see that and I can do better. For some of you, you might be going, oh, but you know, muscle ups are cool because I do muscle ups. My clients come to me and they're like, you know, I want to do muscle ups. So there's a couple lenses that we need you to challenge your headspace through. When you look at individualization, individual programming, and let's look at it through that lens first and foremost, and let's look at it through John. Are we actually going through a bias, which might be on a conscious level or in fact a subconscious level, where we are feeding our own version of our training and we're just projecting it onto our clients and they're all doing a shitty, watered down, maybe watered up version of just hang on to what I do because what I do works for me and hopefully it works for you. That's kind of what happens in the industry on one end. And on the other end, there's this like anti challenge thing where it's like, no, we're not going to find intensity like that because your perception of what we're talking about here is like, yeah, no, that's not safe. That's not safe. Oh, I'm going to dial it back down. But then you dial it back down so much that there isn't room for adequate challenge. There isn't room for adequate progression and adequate adaptation. And then the biggest thing that we want you guys to think about is where do you go from here? Now, that is probably one of the most challenging questions for you guys as a coach is, what if we drew this program out over the next 10 years? How would you then program? Everyone's so obsessed in the industry of like the next block, the next 4-week block, right? It's like, okay, let's look at it over a longer period of time. There's I don't know what the exact science is on this, but there's like there's a saying, every injury costs you 6 months. So let's say if you murder someone, they get injured. I say murder, like let's say you find really good intensity, doing all this stuff, an injury happens, we go back 6 months. We then rebuild back up, take 6 months to start fine fitness again, and we get injured again. Because we're trying to dose the wrong things and we're just trying to, there's too much shit going on. In 10 years, how much progression did we get if it was one step forward, one step back? 0. So let's say you have a client for 10 years. Let's say they paid an average of $3,000 a month to be a member of your gym or, sorry, $3,000 a month. Sorry, that's my old rates back in the 80s when Mass was a coach. All jokes aside, $3,000 a year, right? $3,000 a year they're spending money with you, right? That's low, but let's just say. And over 10 years, they've spent $30,000, but they've actually gone nowhere. That's just zoom out. Just zoom out just a little bit. It's quite a cool way to look at it. Back over to you. Tell me what you want me to do with the slides.
Yeah, cheers, Gento. You've just set me up nicely for the next one, to be honest. So into the pros and cons. So let's look at the pros and cons of both. And I know that you've probably come onto this call looking for some actual prescriptions and thinking about how you're going to progress this thing. I will get to it. If we run over and you've got to shoot, it'll be on the recording. So just sit tight if you can. I'll get there and I'll try and get into as much detail as I can. Of course, it's challenging within an hour, but leave me with it. So pros and cons of flow. Pros: cardiovascular health and function. Very simple. Top line, we know that. Okay. So flow being aerobic. So just keep that in mind. Flow equals aerobic. When we talk about flow, just for your insight, we talk about that flowing nature. So finding that sweet spot of challenge and that's that aerobic piece where it's just continuous. Okay. It's that nice harmony of movement and heart rate and breathing, etc., that just sits real nice. So that's what we talk about with flow. Another pro: oxygen delivery to the brain. So neuroplasticity. So with that in mind, from the coach's point of view, we're talking about skill acquisition. So in essence, and very broadly speaking, the more aerobically fit we are, probably the better chance, all things considered, we have of acquiring new skills or to delivery to muscles. So similar sort of scenario in the strength piece. So we're talking about form there in that absolute strength piece. And then the ability to make contractions aerobic. So increased aerobic capacity gives us an increased chance of making contractions aerobic for the long term. So that 20-minute piece over a long time of training perhaps becomes a reality if the strength goes with it. Recovery, generally. So intra-session and outside the session. So in between reps and sets, it gives us a better recovery rate because we've got better delivery of O2 to the muscles and to the brain. So the central governor allows us to do more. The muscles are recovered and ready to go faster. After sessions, we recover faster, we sleep better, and so then we can do more each day, and so on and so forth. And so then our ability to accept broader challenge grows. Above all, above everything, well, all of the above, should I say, aids then, as I've just alluded to, strength and skill if prescribed and executed correctly. And I will get to that shortly. That's the kicker, okay, with aerobic training. A lot of people think that they're doing aerobic training. I know there's big chat around zone 2 at the moment. Whether it's zone 2, zone 3, zone 1, zone, whatever it is. If it's sustainable and aerobic in nature, if it's flow-like, truly, it works nicely with form, okay? Cons. Let's just read this. Indeed. Well said. Cons of aerobic. Now, these are open to the eye of the beholder, of course. It takes time to build true aerobic capacity. That can be perceived as a con in today's world where we want everything rapid. I want to be fit now. I want to be fit in 12 weeks. I want to look like this in 6 weeks. Aerobic capacity, a long time. So could be perceived as a con. So from a coach's point of view, arm yourself with the knowledge that the expectations from clients might be around seeing that as a negative in aerobic training. Aerobic training then, again, relatively speaking, true aerobic training could be classed as boring, comparatively speaking. So if you think about the razzmatazz that's happening in the high intensity sort of model, looks cool. It's like it creates a feeling, and despite the fact that we know that it's short term and it doesn't have any long term utility, in comparison to a true aerobic piece, it can be classed as more exciting and more entertaining. And this is where we get to that entertainment versus progress point of view. If we want to progress our aerobic system, we have to honor the fact that we have to go long with these aerobic pieces and we have to be consistent with them and we have to continue to work it. It's a skill, aerobic skill. So out of that then, nobody generally wants to take the time to get good at aerobic pieces because it doesn't happen quickly. And that's today's culture, right? We want things quickly and we want a hack. How can I get aerobically fit? How can I increase my VO2 max in, a shorter space of time? All this stuff. And then we need to be smart and sharp with our language and our beliefs around how we communicate that back to the client in order to align these things back with their values and what they want to achieve out the other side. Again, then, cultural time constraints around physical expression. So how much time people have got to train generally make it difficult to explore the aerobic setting. Okay. So generally people have an hour or so to train. So anything beyond an hour of aerobic expression becomes difficult to fit in. People just haven't got time for it. So that can be classed as a con. Any builds on that, Genzo? Flick us onto the 4 stuff then, please.
No, we're all good.
Sweet. So force training. So we're talking about anaerobic here. We're talking, so as the word would suggest, this is activity that requires you to force it. It requires force in order to be anaerobic. With, as we know then, to create force, we need a prerequisite of strength. So the pros is fast, effective, metabolic dose. It's super, super potent. That's a positive. It can be an aerobic booster. So if we're talking about threshold aerobic pieces, having some anaerobic capacity will allow the participant to flirt with that threshold line without having to have significant recovery pieces slotted within it. So they can recover quickly if they've got those, if they've got that dose and that capacity built around the anaerobic piece. So it potentially increases the ceiling of your aerobic threshold. So your ability to dip in and out of lactate and recover quickly and immediately is increased. That's a positive. Another pro in relation to the aerobic system, the flow system, it can be trained relatively quickly. So as we do in the sport of fitness, in CrossFit, as we get closer to competition, depending on the athlete's level of skill and their experience, we can roll out an anaerobic progression in anywhere between 12 to 8 weeks and peak nicely for competition. Conversely, creating an aerobic base in 8 to 12 weeks that's just going to be the start. That's just going to be the start of this big old base. The cons of force is that it's potent. So whether that's a positive, it is potent. So it's, it's super effective. The negative is also that it's potent because in the wrong hands and for the wrong person and with the wrong intentions, it can be an absolute disaster. So if you've got somebody that's coming in to train with you, or somebody that you see is trained on their own, perhaps, because I'm assuming that everybody in here has got great intentions and is doing good stuff. Maybe it's somebody you see doing something on their own. Their intentions are to get stronger and learn skills and develop long-term capacity. But every session, they're handing themselves their ass with some anaerobic nightmare, which only serves to take away from the other two things that they're aiming at. So they have great intentions, they have great effort. So, effort is good and all of the stuff that sits around that. But misdirected effort and misdirected awareness around here, around this piece, can cause this very potent energy system to actually take away from everything else that you're trying to achieve. So that's a con. Another con, to truly express force, we have to have a prerequisite of strength, okay? So it's kind of a con, a relative con this is. So again, this is more of an awareness piece. People think that they can just get on and do some high intensity stuff. What's actually going to happen is, back to the point about the gray area that was just thrown in the chat box, this person ends up in this middle zone where they're not necessarily aerobic, but they're definitely not anaerobic. They sit in this middle zone where they're getting nothing. So not only they're not getting this potent dose, but they're also not getting aerobic. So they sit in this middle area where it's kind of, you're on a hide into nowhere. So that would be a con, in that if you don't realize that there's a prerequisite of strength required here to express force, in which case you're not really being aerobic and you're not really being anaerobic, as in you're in this sort of shitty middle ground. And then the big one, it has no long-term utility. So when we stop training force, it stops. So you'll know that if you've done it. You'll know that if you've done it. Why? Well, think back to evolution. Think back to what we need as humans. We're looking to reduce stress. Our bodies are looking to reduce stress. So as soon as we use that energy system to get us out of what our body perceives as a stressful state, we return back to homeostasis. We return back to O2 being our predominant energy system. And so when we stop training this potent system, it stops. So it serves no utility long term. So it goes nowhere. There's no road of progression over time. it's finite. It's to serve a purpose. If you have a good purpose, but out of the other side of that, it goes nowhere. So these pros and cons of both flow and force, they're super important awareness pieces for us as coaches as far as why and when we're going to prescribe these things. And back to that Gen Pop client and thinking about the pros and cons of force there, you have to have a bloody good reason as to why you're prescribing force for a client. Now, there are some good reasons, and I'll go into that in a minute when we talk about the progression. Genzo, can you flick us onto the intent? So intentions, I'll rattle through these quickly because I know we're coming to the end of our time, and I want to get back to, I want to get to the progression piece. Intentions need to be super clear. Okay, they need to be super clear for the coach. So we have to know why we're doing something. It can't just be a workout that you've done, as Jen mentioned before, that you thought was a good workout for you that you're now going to give to a client, despite the fact that that's not what the client needs. We can't just borrow something that we've seen on the internet, or borrow something that we've seen an athlete doing that looked like a good piece for them. Okay, so we have to be clear in our intent as to how we're helping the client and how we're creating physical challenge for the client in this particular scenario. Between our intention, then we have to have clarity of communication. So this might be, if you're coaching remotely, it might be in your notes. If you're coaching in person, it's clarity around what the client's intention should be for this piece as well, in order to help them. So really, this would be a dose of education. This would be, this is what the intention of this piece should be. This is what it should feel like. This is what I want it to feel like. And this is what I want the desired outcome to look like. So the comms are super clear in order then to set the client up for success in their intentions. So then they go into their piece, knowing exactly what's required of them, exactly how it should feel, exactly where the pinch points might be and what to look out for, and exactly then what to reflect on the other side. Okay. If we get all those things in place, then we have great alignment. Because if our coach's intentions are clear, our coach's intentions should be around what the client's goals were. So then we're lining up between goals and where they are at the moment, and we're trying to fill in the gap in between. So we have that long-term plan that Jen's talked about before. So then our intentions, client intentions lead to alignment, lead to increases of awareness. Okay. So each time the client has an opportunity to express these pieces, they have an opportunity to learn and therefore understand about themselves and therefore increase their awareness. So that now then, as the more times they go into these workouts, the more they know, okay, and the more they're looking out for, in which case we're upgrading or recalibrating their intuition. So all of a sudden then, the client starts to know exactly how an aerobic piece should feel, and conversely, how an anaerobic workout should feel if they want to go there, okay? So the intuition then is upgraded. All the while then, with all this stuff is leading to the autonomy piece. So this is all leading towards giving the client as much support and guidance and knowledge as they need in order to look after themselves over time, okay? So those intention pieces are key when we're thinking about how to program this thing. Okay. Genzo, can you just flick us on, please, mate? Principles of progression then. So to the good stuff. All that being said, now, what I don't want to do is then have your mind go to this and you only remember this bit. Everything else I would say that we've talked about today is more important to how you progress these things than what I'm going to say right now, because all I'm going to do is give you some examples, okay? How you play out these examples, what your intentions are in them, etc., how you define the client's intentions should all be based upon what I've spoke about before, all right? So then, how do we progress? Let me just have a look at the chat box very quickly. What would be a good test for aerobic endurance? Good level of it. Okay, cool. That is a great question, and it's pertinent to now. Okay, so principles of progression. First of all, the key to both these energy systems is the assessment. All right. Now, as we always say, what we only want to assess things that mean something. So first of all, do you know what to do with the findings of your assessment? That would be something that means something. And also, does it matter to the goal? So If the client has goals around just general health and fitness with no particular sporting pursuit, wants to get strong, wants to learn some more skills over time, but generally wants to feel better, etc., etc., they have no business in the force section. So then, in our assessment piece, there'd be no reason to waste our time or the client's energy in looking into that force piece. Like, what can you do anaerobically? There's no point at all. Having said that, from a flow point of view, there is the requirement. So generally, we will be looking to establish the client's starting point in their aerobic training. So some things to look into from the and we go into this in much more detail in FFC 1, and we will do in FFC 2 as well. But we want to be looking at their experience. We want to be looking at their training age. We want to be looking at what they've experienced, also their type of contractions that they've worked, that they've completed up to now. How many contractions, of what type, etc., etc., etc. Will give you a good insight into where they're up to on their aerobic progression, okay, and what they can and cannot do. Now, this is going to be a bit of an airy-fairy answer or an airy-fairy start to this equation, but then the test piece that you give the individual will be based off of what they've done before. So for the beginner, you could either go super short, okay, so knowing that they haven't done anything long, their aerobic piece might be a repeatability test with 1 minute on, 1 minute off, okay? Knowing that if they're a beginner, they haven't got the prerequisite of strength to make that anaerobic, so it will be repeatable. But it's like, what can you get out of perhaps 5 1-minute windows on a cyclical piece of equipment? Probably the bike, because it's the lowest skill, okay? So that would be a starting point. From the other end of the spectrum, for somebody that's never been in the gym, that's perhaps overweight, that has never done any sort of metabolic conditioning at all in their life, has been relatively inactive for a long period of time, etc., etc., their test might be a long walk, and you might go with them, okay? And you might pull some metrics out of that probably aren't important to the client, but are just important to you as far as how the client is feeling as well, and so giving some subjectivity to that. So you know, things like any muscle pain, what's their heart rate like, what's their breathing like. You might measure their heart rate throughout that thing, and so then we get a starting point, okay, for each client. General principle for the progression of flow. So you can see here in the diagram, form and flow work very well together, as we said before, and force should be kept low or perhaps to not at all, okay, in order to progress those two. But in progressing flow, what we want to do is start long and work shorter, okay? So start long and work shorter. The idea that as we're out here in the long piece, so that might be 45 minutes, it might be an hour, depending on the time that you've got with the client, depending on the time that they've got. The expression and the pace of that is this very sort of steady flow, this very steady flow. It's almost like a walk in the park type pace, okay? So it's 45 minutes to an hour of very steady aerobic. And the idea that you want to hold in mind here for any aerobic piece is that they can continue the pace that they're using within the piece for perhaps 3 to 4 times that again, okay? So if they were asked to, they could continue that for 3 to 4 times again. So if it was an hour, you'd be saying to the person, to your client, I want you to pace this at a pace that you could continue for perhaps 3 to 4 hours, all right? And they're like, what? That's fucking so long. It's like, yeah, I know. That's where I want you to be. And then we're going to progress it. So I've written a piece here. An example of long flow. I'll stick it in the chat box. AMRAP 45, 2 km, bike erg, 30 seconds per side, single arm, farmer's walk, 20 prisoner box step ups. Now, as I said to before, as far as the cons of flow, you might look at that and go, fuck me, that's boring. If that's what you need, I couldn't care less. So what I mean by that, what fits into these aerobic pieces should only be contractions that the client is able to maintain an aerobic nature of. Okay. So for entertainment's sake, we might be tempted to throw in some Russian kettlebell swings. We might be tempted to throw in some burpee box jump overs rather than the step ups, because it's a little bit cooler and it'll, and we might call it a finisher, whatever. What happens with that though? Not aerobic. Can we get the workout in the chat? Sorry, I've sent it to panelists only. Just a sec. My bad. Jens, can you share that? I can't seem to share it. Thank you. So what sits in? So even this piece, 30 seconds per side, single arm farmer's walk. If the client's grip isn't sufficient to be able to hold a kettlebell in one hand at a certain weight for 30 seconds, that's not going to be aerobic in nature. Okay. The muscle fatigue in the forearm and probably in the shoulder and what have you, perhaps through the core, it's going to break down over time. So it's not going to be flow-like. It's going to become grindy. Okay. So we're going to get more elements of the anaerobic forceful nature than we would like. So what I'm saying is this looks like a perfectly fine, steady aerobic flow piece. But again, for the wrong person, it might not be. So the key to this whole thing, and this is why we don't want to spend too much time around the examples here, because it's very much individually decided, okay? And it really does depend. And the key factor is ensuring that through your coaching, you've given the client adequate opportunity to develop an aerobic capacity for the contractions that you're placing within these aerobic pieces. How do you do that? You do that in skill setting in isolation. Okay. So in this piece, the 20 step ups, okay, you might start that as your single leg strength practice. Okay. If they've not got that for the person that's never worked out before, imagine how those 20 step ups would be for that person. Their heart rate is going to get jacked up. So it's something that they need to work towards in isolation in a work rest ratio. So it's perhaps 10 box step ups, rest 2 minutes. Okay. If they're of significant weight, that's going to be tough work. Okay. Try putting that into a 45-minute piece. You can see how that would break down. So whatever sits in here, as simple as this piece looks, needs to be aerobic for the client. All right. So in a group setting, if we've got a conditioning piece, this is where we need to be real sharp around what we're prescribing and what we're delivering as a coach. Okay. If it's small group or if it's large group or whatever it might be, we need to be pretty sharp to ensure that, again, back to the critical thought around the AMRAP 20. What is it we're looking to get out of this piece? Is it aerobic? Are we looking to get some single leg activity? And are we looking to get some grip and core activity with the farmer's walk? If that's the case, can we just manipulate the workout? Perhaps we'll manipulate the time frames, the reps, whatever the pieces might be within it for each particular person that's standing in front of us. And that's the challenge. Okay. Question: how do you bridge the gap of progress and entertainment? I find clients pay. Good question. Leave it with me. So how would we progress this 45-minute piece? And a few of you alluded to this when we talked about the 20-minute piece. What we'd be looking to do with this 45-minute piece is to really reduce the time frame over time, okay, so that we could increase the pace. So rather than this 45-minute pace, this nice and steady, 30 minutes might be just a little bit faster, okay? And then 20 minutes is a little bit quicker again, okay? So the 45-minute piece, if they're conditioning, their aerobic conditioning in this piece gets to a point, it might be that you go to 30 minutes of the same, okay? You might then, alongside that, you're working on some skills that you're making aerobic, and so you can start to plug different movements into these aerobic pieces. That might then get to 2 times 20-minute pieces with a rest in between. Over time, that might become 3 15-minute pieces with a rest in between each piece. And then over time, that might be 3 to 4 10-minute pieces, etc., etc., etc. All the while, as we break this thing down and make the work time shorter, the pace starts to increase. Why? Because the time frame, the broader time frame that we're asking them to think about when they think about their pacing, i.e. 3 to 4 times that, gets reduced. So for the 10-minute piece, really, what this 45-minute piece does is it gives a great it gives a great piece of understanding around what their pacing for 10 minutes should be. All right. So we know how much faster that should be for that 10-minute piece. So then the client starts to build that intuition, starts to build that level of awareness. Okay. And so then you should get to the point where the client can look at the workout and think critically and say, what's coach after for me here? And they can decipher that and organize themselves accordingly. All right. So bridging the gap between progress and entertainment. I think you give some of what the client wants. So we have to have an element of fun to this piece, okay? But then we have a responsibility. So fun can't be the founding sort of purpose of our sessions if we want to help the clients move forward. Otherwise, we're on a merry-go-round with them, and we're taking their money and taking the piss, as Jen talked about there with the 10-year progress piece. Okay, so it's giving them some of what they want, and that might be that they enjoy a mixed piece, despite the fact that we know that they're not necessarily ready. So their contractions aren't ready for a mixed aerobic piece. We need them to be smart around what we put in that mixed piece. So I'm sure we can find something that we can make a piece mixed, okay? All the while alongside that, giving them what they want, we give them a little bit more of what they need. And with that then, a massive dose of education. Within that as well, there's times here and there when we can allow them to fail with solid guardrails around them. So get them to feel, so you really want that? Okay, let's give that a whirl. Let's give that a whirl and see how it plays out. One condition, I want us to stop and reflect after it, and I want you to be truly honest about the outcome of the session, okay? And then we can decide between us how useful that piece was. So then it's at least an awareness piece. And what happens over time then, and this is the beautiful thing around coaching, what used to be what they need is now actually becoming what they want, because it aligns with them and they can feel the progress that it's making, and they can feel the impact of it in the broad sense outside the gym and then in their own performance, how they feel, etc., etc., etc. So that's the aim, okay? So a little bit of what they want in order to make really what they need over time actually what they want is how I would answer that question. Can you flick us on to force, please, Genzo? I'm not going to spend too long on this because this really is sort of aimed, this isn't aimed at sport, this chat, it's aimed at Gen Pop. But just for your own knowledge, the progression of force would be from short to long. We also need to be careful what sits within this. So with the requirement for the prerequisite here to be strength, so we need to be strong enough to make these contractions forceful, okay? So what sits in here shouldn't be slow. All right. So if you think of like long drawn out contractions, so think about Olympic lifting. All right. All right, they're powerful in nature, but the time between reps, even if you're doing touch and go power snatches or whatever it might be, you kind of get into that flow. Okay. And so then we want to be selecting to go in here very simple. Okay, very simple and potent movements. So things like assault bite's great here. Assault bite's great. Sled pushes are great. Kettlebell swings great, but still erring on like that flowy nature. And then really anything else is governed by the person in mind and what they can actually achieve. Okay. If you think there, the whole chat and generation around HIIT that we're in at the moment, for most people, that won't actually be forceful in nature. It won't be high intensity because they haven't got the prerequisite of strength to be forceful for that period of time with those select movements. Okay, so just something to bear in mind there, that just be careful what you put into this if force is actually what you want. For most sporting pursuits outside the sport of fitness, your client will get sufficient touches on this system by playing the sport, especially if it's a field sport. So if they're playing football, hockey, rugby, American football, whatever it might be on the field, if we try and train this in the gym, it's probably going to take away from their ability to recover through the week, such that it impacts their ability to acquire skills and refine skills in their sport, and then takes away from their performance at the weekend. Whereas If they get enough touch points in the sport, so they're training a couple of times a week and then playing at a weekend, that's sufficient. We don't need to go there. What we should be doing with those people is bolstering their performance with aerobic capacity and great strength, creating a robust and resilient human. Okay. So then, all that being said, I'm just trying to wrap up quickly because I know we've gone well over time. Back to the progress versus entertainment.
Standard mass. Under promise, over deliver.
sorry.
I'm sure 107 people are not complaining. So
no,
we'll just keep going.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And you can probably sense by I'm cutting these short, so I could have gone on for hours on this, and we will do in FFC too.
It's just all the passion, my friend, all the passion.
I know. So back to the progress versus entertainment, needs versus wants, and to that point that we just made then, and you set me up nicely for this. Really, you can see then in everything that we've discussed today what real progress should be made of, and what should sit within it, and what we should be thinking about when we're prescribing these things. Safe in the knowledge that we will get it wrong. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about creating the perfect plan every time. Things will happen, especially in Gen Pop. Their lifestyles will dictate that. Even what they've previously expressed as aerobic on a particular day, if stress is high outside the gym, might actually feature as anaerobic or more anaerobic than it was previously on a particular day. So, those can just be insights, really. And if the client have fun doing it, then you know, that's just how it goes. But what we were trying to make the point here in this piece with the education, with the energy systems, is that really the entertainment side of this stuff is a road to nowhere. It's not useful for you as a coach. It's not useful for your clients. And really, I don't think by delivering that stuff that we're taking responsibility for our roles in this industry. And so really our business is providing sufficient iterative challenge for our clients. That's the key. Sufficient iterative challenge. And as we get better at coaches, it's not that our systems become more complex. They actually become simpler. And all that happens is our ability to sniff out the exact challenge that lies next for the client gets easier and easier for us. Okay. So I'll call it at that. I'll let you get on with your afternoons. Genzo, close it up for me.
Yeah. Firstly, phenomenal work there. And just kind of finish that wrap up there with Mass. So for those of you going, but how do we control our clients' needs and wants and all that kind of stuff? Essentially, by being able to be really confident with what it is that you've uncovered through your investigation as to who they are, what they are, like what makes them up, and what it is that they're trying to go towards, through really good confident practice as a coach behind the scenes, through really good education, we know that we can then be more confident with our conviction of delivery of what I can get you to. And therefore, it's an education piece and a sale towards getting them to buy into that, in which will be progressive and entertaining, because it's rewarding. And most people, what they really want is they want support, they want structure, they want accountability, and they want results for the efforts that they put into the gym. That's why they'd rather come to a professional like you, like us, like what we're trying to create. So it actually comes full circle, both from a technician point of view as well as a business point of view as well, which is really, really important. Look, typically we would have time for Q&A, but we've run over. So here's what we're going to do. If you guys please tag us on Instagram, the PFCA, that would be really, really amazing. And then if you head over to the story, I've gone and put a little question box in the Instagram story on the PFCA. Any questions that you guys have, go throw it in there, and myself and Mass will dedicate as much time as we need to over the next 24 hours to answer that and to engage with you. Additionally, I just want to say thank you for, giving up your time this afternoon to sit with us, to be challenged, to be educated, and to hopefully leave in a better place than you came in an hour and 20 ago. That's literally us down to a T, and we hope that you got a lot of value from it. But from me, I want to say thank you to all of you on behalf of Mass, I know that he's really grateful for the opportunity to just share the stuff that actually goes on behind the scenes. It's hard to share this amount of complexity and density just through socials. So hopefully you guys got a real insight as to the kind of shit that goes on. All right. For those of you who are unaware of the FFC course, we have the market leading certification course online at the moment. No one else can compare to it. And if you're looking to learn and develop as a coach, it is a no-brainer. For those of you who are currently doing it, make sure you get it done, because at the end of this week, we are going to give a very exclusive 40 places to FFC2 in June. So all things PFCA, we're cooking on gas, and we're taking some incredible coaches with us on the journey. So make sure you guys are on the bus. All right. But from me, thank you so much. From Mass, Epic, Mass, you hit it out of the park, my friend. And I'll see everyone on the other side. All right. Laters. You're all welcome, guys. Bye-bye.